Okay, hi there and welcome to the second Head Start session. And in this short series of videos, we're going to be exploring some aspects of the important issue of globalisation. Now, this is a huge topic, but these three videos in the series just provide an introduction that we hope will encourage you to explore this topic further. There are many definitions of globalisation. Here's one that I like. Globalisation is a process by which economies around the world have become more interconnected and interdependent. That process idea is quite important. It's not an event, it's a sequence. Economies and cultures are being drawn together through a global network of trade, of capital investment, of the rapid spread and dissemination of digital technologies, global media. Those technologies oftentimes bring down the cost of communication and increase the speed at which information is disseminated around the world. So globalization is about interconnectedness, interdependent behavior. What are the main features of globalization? Well, in this first video, we will look at some of the main features of globalization. You might want to think now about how the global pandemic might have an impact on some of the trends that we'll touch on. It's unlikely that we'll return to the globalization of normal times soon, perhaps if at all. But we start by thinking in basic terms about the key feature of globalization, which is increased international trade. The value, if we add it all up, of global trade in goods and services was over $25 trillion in 2018, but actually the World Trade Organization is forecasting perhaps a 5, perhaps even a 10% fall in the value of trade in 2020. But trade lies at the heart of globalization. So what is trade? Well, trade is the production and exchange of goods and services across international borders. These are three of the most heavily traded products in the world: crude oil, soybeans and iron. So we typically think of those big container ships full of carrying oil and commodities and products around the world. And yes, that is a key part of merchandise trade in a globalized world. But trade in services is also becoming a very important aspect of the global economy. And these services range from education, foreign students coming to a particular country to study, medical tourism in the healthcare sector, and also the technologies and the intellectual property behind some of the billions of dollars of pharmaceutical products that cross the world each year. We put a student activity into the webpage which gets you to think about which countries are the leading exporters of certain products. So this is an interesting chart from the team at Our World in Data, and it shows the total value of trade, exports and imports added together as a share of a country's GDP. Now, the darker the colour, the more open a country is to trade. In other words, trade is very important in the form of exports and imports. Indeed, some countries have a value of trade greater than the GDP. The export and import value, if you add together, is 200-300% above the level of GDP. Those are highly open, highly trading countries. So trade's a key aspect of globalization. So too is the rise of transnational businesses and transnational brands. Nestle, for example, the iconic Kit Kat, is manufactured in 16 different countries, including the UK, Yorkshire, Canada, Australia, Germany, Russia, Japan and India. Another really important aspect of globalization is the emergence of the development of global supply chains. We live in a world of complex products, and those complex products nearly always come from many different countries, be it the component parts, be it the natural raw materials, the chemicals, for example, be it the design and intellectual knowledge behind a product. Global supply chains are really crucial. Here's a great example: the iPhone, of course, which was first launched in 2007. The iPhone is part of a complex global supply chain. The product essentially conceived and designed in Silicon Valley in the United States. The software, perhaps enhanced by software engineers working in India. Most iPhones are assembled still in China and in Taiwan. And Apple, according to this article from CNBC 2018, Apple works with suppliers in over 40 countries and across 6 continents to make its products. And that supply chain gets then more complicated when you break it down into raw materials. For example, the number of elements in the periodic table which find their way into an iPhone. This is what we mean by global supply chains in a globalized world. And here's another fantastic example of global supply chains. The supply chain is essentially the many steps involved in manufacturing, distribution, getting products to market. In this case, Boeing has a supply chain that covers 5 continents, the wingtips from South Korea, the center fuselage from Italy, the landing gear from the UK and Japan. Now, a key aspect of globalization is the development of global supply chains that allow us to provide and eventually consume goods and services of enormous complexity. A fourth aspect of globalization is the movement of people across borders, and that movement, of course, is high. Just a couple of years ago, migrant workers accounted for over 160 million of the world's approximately 250 million plus international migrants. That figure may well have increased, certainly recently, perhaps until the pandemic took hold. Some data, just a little bit on migration into and out of the UK. If you follow the top line here, the yellow line, that's the number of people coming into the UK. And migration into Britain accelerated from the mid-1990s onwards, but reaching a peak of over 600,000 in any one year. I think it was 2015. But has slowed down since the Brexit referendum of 2016. The red line, or the orange line, shows the number of people leaving the UK, and that has also increased. So you have people coming in and people leaving. That gives a net figure. So net migration is perhaps the important measure. That's the net balance of people coming into a country. And in the UK, that net figure has been positive, but the figure is now slowing to about 200,000 people a year. But migration, again, a key aspect of globalization. And in the second video, we'll explore some aspects of the process of globalization. In other words, we'll take a look at, for a few minutes, the main drivers of globalization.